Now to our next question. Let's now go to the next question. Let us go to the question that follows. Next question. So the next question is here with us. Let's see what the question is asking. The question is asking. Now listen to this question. They are saying that the probability that a student in a day school gets grade A in KCSE exams is 1/9. So A in KCSE, that the probability of a student getting an A in KCSE exams is 1/9. And if a day scholar gets an A, the probability they are admitted to medical school is 1/7. So A scholar admitted to a medical school, 1/7. Fine. So if a day scholar he gets an A, and admitted to a medical school, 1/7. If they don't get an A, the probability they are admitted to a medical school is 2/11. The scholar not get an A and admitted, of course, to a medical school. They are saying it is 2/11. If a student gets an A, the probability he graduates as a doctor is 3/5. Student gets an A and graduates as a doctor. Graduates as a doctor, 3/5. If they didn't get an A, the probability they graduate as a doctor is 4/7. So not get an A but graduate as a doctor. So they don't get an A but graduate as a doctor, the probability is 4/7. There we go. So then I'm supposed to first prepare a tree diagram for all this information before I can even start answering the questions thereafter. So we are supposed to have this. We are supposed to have this as our tree diagram, correct? So, and of course, I'm going to look at the first information. They are saying the probability that a student in a day school gets grade A. So, get A here, not get A. So, you are actually assuming that this student is in a day school and that student gets an A. So, the probability that a student in a day school gets a grade A in KCSE exam is 1/9. So, if you are in a day school and you get, so of course, you are expecting all the students are in a day school, with no any assumption of students being in a boarding school, because there's not any option of being in a boarding school. I just told us the probability that a student in a day school gets grade A. So you're in a day school and you get an A. What is the probability of you're in a day school and you get an A? I have said 1/9. So you can be in a day school and don't get an A. So that means you're going to have a probability of 8/9. You are in a day school and you don't get an A, 8. So there's a very low chance of a student who is in a day school getting an A. But yeah, of course, only 1/9. The assumption is that only 1 out of 9 students can get an A, and 8 out of 9 cannot get an A if they're actually in a day school. They're saying that if a day scholar gets an A, the probability they are admitted to medical school is 1/7. So you get an A and admitted to medical or not admitted to medical. So admitted to medical school 1/7. So you can be a day scholar, you get an A. probability is 1 over 9. After that, you can either get admitted to medical school or not get admitted to medical school. So the probability of getting admitted to a medical school, 1 over 7. Not getting admitted to a medical school, that is 6 over 7. They are telling us if they don't get an A, not get an A. So if they don't get an A, the probability they are admitted to a medical school is 2 over 11. So not get an A, admitted to medical school, right? Not admitted to medical school. So that is 2 over 11. Okay. You never got an A as a day scholar, but you got admitted to a medical school, 2 over 11. Very good. So that means this 9 over 11 will be if you don't get an A and you're not again admitted to a medical school, still with a very low chance. If a student gets an A, the probability he graduates as a doctor is 3 over 5. So if you get an A and you graduate as a doctor, so that means you've gotten an A, you've been admitted to a medical school. So you can either graduate or not graduate. Nice. So you only, for example here, you don't get an A, you are admitted to a medical school and you either graduate or not graduate. You don't even have an option for not admitted because you can't get admitted to a medical school and then you graduate as a doctor. That one doesn't even work. I can't come and start looking for an option of graduate or not graduate. Why? Because you don't get an A, not admitted to a medical school, how do you even get that title of being a doctor? So you cannot even have that option. So then if they don't get, so they've said that if a student gets an A, the probability he graduates as a doctor is 3 over 5. So you get an A, so they said if a student gets an A, the probability that he graduates as a doctor is 3 over 5. So graduate as a doctor, 3 over 5. So probability of you graduating as a doctor is 3 over 5. So not graduating, that will be 2 over 5. If you get an A, that is. So get an A, then graduate, not graduate. Of course, you can also have these options, graduate, not graduate. So let's see. If a student gets an A, the probability he graduates as a doctor is 3 over 5. So get an A, admit to medical school, graduate, not graduate. Get an A, not admit to medical school, graduate, not graduate. Okay, fine. If they didn't get an A, the probability they graduate as a doctor is 4 over 7. Not get an A, admit to medical school, graduate. So that means you're going to have here 4 over 7, then here 3 over 7. Wow. Represent the above information in a tree diagram or in a tree diagram. That is what you're supposed to have. We won't have options for graduate or not graduate for this aspect of not admitted in a medical school. So that thing that we are going to just remove this because it will not make sense to us. So someone gets an A, admitted to a medical school, graduate as a doctor, not graduate. Not get an A, you admitted a medical school, graduate or not graduate as a doctor. So then the next part says, find the probability that a day scholar student is not admitted to a medical school. The scholar not admitted. So you can say probability of get an A, not admitted. Or is the scholar probability of not get an A and not admitted to a medical school. Those can be options because I've just said the scholar student is not admitted to a medical school. So that means you can get an A and you don't get admitted, or you don't get an A and you don't get admitted. Those can be the options. So they shall come just here and say get an A 1 over 9. It's not writing. 1 over 9 times not admitted 6 over 7. Okay, or means plus in probability. Not get an A 8 over 9. Multiply by not admitted to a medical school 9 over 11. Wow, so of course this and this can cancel. Then of course we shall say 3 there, 2, 3 there, 3. So we shall have 2 out of 21 plus 8 out of 11. I can get this as our answer. So we shall just even enter them 1 over 9 multiply by 6 over 7 multiply by 6 over 7, then plus 8 over 9 times 9 over 11. That is 190 over 231. So that is the probability that a student is not admitted to a medical school as a day scholar. Great. Next says, a day scholar student graduates as a doctor. A day scholar graduates as a doctor. So I just start from this end. So probability of get an A, admitted to a medical school, and graduate as a doctor. Or probability of not get an A, okay, admitted to a medical school, and you graduate as a doctor. So I'm just told that the student graduates as a doctor. The student might have gotten an A, got admitted to a medical school, then graduated as a doctor. But the student never got an A, got admitted to a medical school, and then graduated as a doctor as well. So we start 1 over 9, got an A, admitted 1 over 7, graduated as a doctor 3 over 5. Or come here, not get an A, 8 over 9, multiply by admitted to a medical school 2 over 11, multiply by graduate as a doctor 4 over 7. Wow, it's a very easy question. So you come here and say 1 over 9, multiply by 1 over 7, over 7, multiply by 3 over 5. That is 1 over 1 over 5, 1 over 1 over 5. Then say plus, so there can be only two options for that matter. Then you can actually have 8 over 9, not get an A, admitted to medical school, that is 1 over 7. If I'm not. So times 2 over 11. So 8 over 9